Hey there, guys. Welcome back to our show. This is
Hello.
Money Talk with Ben. Da, da, da.
Hi,
The one
everyone.
and only Ben Nadler.
Well, there are others out there, but for this
That's
purpose,
actually
yes.
true. Well, as you guys might have noticed, today the Dow is down again. And over the last, 6 months of 2022, it has dropped 12%. So, as
Wow.
we're all watching your retirement savings drain away, we are, I think, all asking ourselves this question: what could I have done differently? Right?
Right.
And more
Right.
importantly, what do I do now? So, I thought we would invite Ben back on to Money Talk with Ben to talk about what do we do when the stock market starts to dip and
Right.
we watch our retirement savings start to dribble away.
Right. Right. Well, one of the first things that people want to do when it starts dropping is they get nervous and they want to take their money out. And on the little drops, you really want to try to ride those things if possible, right? Because otherwise you're going to lose money most likely on the drops, because sometimes they can be a big drop, and where you started at, you're losing money compared to where you got in. Now, obviously,
Right.
there's some times where you want to cut your losses, and I'm not going to get into telling, each person is different, and that's why I don't really want to get into specifics on it. But there are times when you do need to cut losses, but that's not really what we're going to focus on today. Really, what I wanted to talk about instead was the idea of diversification, which I know we've talked about a little bit before on this podcast, but I thought it would be good to kind of talk about it again, because the markets are crazy and everybody's like, oh, what do I do? And even sometimes when I'm looking at some of my portfolio stuff, I'm just like, oh, geez, well, yeah, that didn't feel great. So the first thing
No.
I wanted to do is I just wanted to read a couple things defining diversification. And there's this great website. It's called Investopedia. And they have a great way of explaining a lot of concepts very simply. So I just wanted to use a couple things that they had in there and go over them. So the first thing they said is diversification is a strategy that mixes a wide variety of investments within a portfolio. And what we mean by a portfolio is the grouping of like all the different stocks that we have for that person. So there could be 5 different companies that's invested in, 2,000 companies, whatever it is, it's that mix of them. So the more that we have, the more diversified you are over hopefully different sectors of markets. Like what we mean by sectors is it could be the oil industry. I'm just going to take random. I'm not saying you should or should invest in these things. I'm just picking them out of the air. The oil industry, the housing industry, pharmaceutical industry, construction industry, all these different industries are ways that if you had certain stock in different parts of these companies in different areas, you're diversified amongst the economy, meaning if the housing market got hit, but other areas like the car market for some reason is still doing great, you could actually still have your portfolio overall going up because you weren't just having all of your stocks in just the housing market, right? So
So,
that's
how
one.
would that help us on something like today, where, like I said, the
Sure.
Dow is down? How would diversification have helped you with that?
Sure. So probably what it's going to do is if the overall market is down, let's just be honest, there are days where it doesn't matter how diversified you are in just the stock market, you're going to probably take a hit. And, recently, most people have been feeling that effects. However, what that's going to do is it's going to alleviate how much of a hit you're going to take typically, because like we said, even though the stock market could be overall down and even down greatly, there are typically certain areas that will rebound or not rebound, but won't be hit as hard. So if you are diversified more, the likelihood of taking a huge hit is going to be drastically less, just because your exposure to all these different areas is much greater than if we only, let's say if we had our money in stocks that were only in, let's say, the oil industry, and the oil industry for some reason was actually tanking right now, which it's not,
Yeah.
but let's just say that it was, and you only had your money in that area. Well, other parts of the economy might have been doing good, but just the oil is really low. And so since we had all our money in there, we're actually losing a lot of money and we're not very well protected, especially if we're looking at this as like a long-term investment type of strategy for retirement and things like that. Not a very good way to have that money being allocated.
Right. So
Okay.
that's within the stock market itself. What about other
Exactly.
types of diversification
Sure. I'm
for
glad.
when the entire economy starts to tank?
Exactly.
What else
Exactly.
can we have done or could we have done? Because, right, we want to address not only like, we'll get to what do you do now, right? But
Right.
what could we have done that would have avoided losing so much in the stock market today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great question. And so actually on their second little definition here is another thing. So it says portfolio holdings can be diversified across asset classes and within classes and also geographically by investing in both domestic and foreign markets. So this one kind of touches on it. There's a little bit more that I'm going to go into that in a second here. But so first off, what this is really getting at is what we were talking about a minute ago is like the asset classes. And they're talking more about the stock market. But what I like to also focus on is beyond the stock market, really taking that macro view of investing. And what we're talking about now is not just putting money into the stock market, but putting in things like precious metals. Gold and silver could be one spot. Bonds, which are usually fairly safe, depending on which types of bonds that you get. You could do certain types of real estate investing, either actual homes that you're putting your money into, or what's called an REIT, which is, I think, a real estate investment trust. Basically, it's a way to have people pool their money together in order to invest into real estate. That's
I
another.
believe Cardone Capital is a good example of that. I know a couple of people
Yes.
in this group have
Right.
invested with Grant Cardone in
Right.
his real estate
Exactly.
trust, right? So
Exactly.
that's a great example of that. You don't personally own one of those, enormous rental, apartment buildings that he owns, but you've
Exactly.
invested a small piece, and so you own a small piece of that. And so
Right.
as it creates profit, it will return revenue to you.
Exactly.
So again, and if the stock market tanks, well, those people still live in those apartments, so they're still going to be paying their rent, and you'll still be
paying
getting
money.
some income,
Exactly.
hopefully.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. And so there's other ways to other areas that you can invest your money in. Again, I won't get into all the different ways, but that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about diversification is putting money into different areas. So for example, maybe the stock market took a hit and maybe the housing market took a hit, but the precious metals as a safety net have actually retained their value and maybe have gone up a bit. And so now
Yeah.
maybe we've taken a hit in certain areas, but our other areas maybe are actually doing pretty well. Some people put money into art and other types of collections like that. And honestly, in certain instances, that could also be a way to, hedge against some of these losses as well. It depends on the individual person again, too. I wouldn't recommend, for example, investing in art if you knew nothing about it, right? That would be a really poor way of trying to put your money in something that you don't understand very well. But people that do, that could be a fairly safe thing because they understand how the market's working on that. They understand what is good to invest in and whatnot. So there's many different classes, these asset classes that you could have your money in. And it's really just hooking up with somebody that knows how to get you diversified and knows a bit about the markets and these different markets and getting your money properly set up.
Very cool. So we talked about different asset classes, and within the classes, like you said, what
Right.
about geographically? I mean, I know we talk all the time about the US stock market, but
Right.
aren't there
Yeah.
foreign markets as well?
There's foreign markets for all kinds of countries. You could have stocks and other types of investments in all kinds of other countries. If you have particular countries that you like or you think that are up and coming that would be good to invest in, lots of people have money in the Japanese stock market. And I won't get into the names of them, but you have Japanese stock market, the German stock market, the Chinese stock market. Basically every major country and even a lot of the minor countries or smaller countries also have their own stock markets. And this is a way for you to find companies that maybe you believe in certain sectors and be able to invest in those. We talked earlier about the idea of investing in things that you believe in, not just to make money, but actually find things that you think are going to be long-term benefits, long-term things that are going to benefit you financially, but also maybe benefit the economy and the world and whatnot. And the United States isn't the only place that has technology and other things happening. So being able to find those other things in other countries is a great way to get diversified as well.
And then, of course, you have small businesses as well, right? You don't have to invest all your money into stock or
Right.
things like that. You can find a small business that's local and you can invest in that. You can loan them money and have them pay
Right.
you back, right, over the time with their profits. You can start your own business. You can have a side hustle. Like there's a lot of ways
Exactly.
to save money or make your money work for you towards retirement that diversifies that income so that even if the stock market does crash, you know, if you're the only guy in town who sells toilet paper, right? Like
That'd be good.
you're probably still going to have income.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
thinking
Well, and that's a
about
great,
income in retirement, not just savings for retirement, is another type of diversification.
right.
So I think this is really good, Ben. This is a good list of the different things we could have done. If you have all your money in your, 401k right now and you're just watching it tank, it's good to know, I think, some of the things that you could have done to prevent that loss. Now, should you pull it all out? Like Ben said, that's really a question for your financial advisor. It depends on where your money's at, right? But I think as far as what can we do now, Ben, let's say I have, $20,000 in my savings account and I've been thinking about putting it in the stock market, but I'm watching the stock market just go like this, what can I do right now to start diversifying and really being a little bit more financially savvy about my making my money work for me?
Right, absolutely. Well, first off, if you don't really know the space very well, meaning like the investment space, I would definitely recommend hooking up with somebody like a financial advisor just to even give you some brief tips. It doesn't have to be me, though I'm more than happy to help you out, but somebody that just understands kind of what's going on. Because honestly, right now, when the stock markets are going down, sometimes those are great times to buy because, buying what's called buy low and sell high. Now, in the specific area that you're going to buy in, maybe it's low, but it's not really that low compared to its overall trend, right? We might have seen a little bit of a dip, but overall it's actually much higher up and maybe it's still not a good time to buy in. So knowing these things and being able to research them is really important to buying in the proper time period. And that's why dealing with somebody like a financial advisor, somebody that deals with the investment stuff a lot, can help you out in this area. So that way you're buying appropriately. And then starting off, if you did have a chunk of money to invest in, or even you just want to get started, again, it's going back to starting from day one, having that diversification in place, right? We're not just going to put all our money into GameStop. We'll pick on them because that was the big fun one recently, or somewhat recently, where people were taking their life savings and putting it in. You know what? Probably 5 people made a bunch of money on it, and everybody else made either a tiny amount or they lost money, right? Because they got in late. When by the time you hear about it, or by the time we hear about it, usually it's too late. To be perfectly honest, to get those crazy big sweeping gains and rewards that some of these people are getting that you're hearing about is typically a little bit late. So we don't really want to jump on those crazy bandwagons. We want to be protected because I'm guessing that a lot of people that are watching this or listening to this, they're trying to invest for the long term. And so we want to be a little bit more conservative. Maybe if you're really young, you can be a bit more aggressive on it, but you want to be conservative enough that the money is actually growing and isn't disappearing. We want money that's going to be there still, and we don't want to take these crazy losses, right? So being diversified.
I think the key thing, though, is like you said, it's to make sure your money is growing faster than inflation is. So I want to just share this slide from one of our trainings, Ben, that we've done in the past. And I think it really demonstrates this because if you leave it in your savings account, it is absolutely losing money right then and there. So don't even be afraid of the stock market more than you are afraid of your own savings account. Like that's a more dangerous place to put your money long term.
Absolutely. If we look at just last year, I think what was the inflation was around between 8 and 10%. Let's just say it was 8%, and your savings account was making 0.01%, let's just say, which is pretty typical. The amount of money that you lost in that year just based on inflation is not an insignificant amount. So if you had that money in the stock market, let's say you didn't diversify and you only had it in the stock market and you're overall up over the last year 2%, you're actually still doing better than if you had just left it in your savings account, right? So I realized that gains are all relative, and sometimes it's hard to see those gains in massive losses or large losses or downturns. But when we're like Sarah was saying, when you're comparing it to what you're making in a savings account, the banks are paying you nothing to use your money to go invest in those things that you should be investing in.
Right.
So
you can either let the bank make money off of your money, or you can go make money off your money yourself, you know?
Right.
Now you can.
Oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead,
Sorry,
Ben.
I'll let you finish. I was just going to say, now there's a difference between having some money in there for an emergency fund, which is a little bit different, and we won't really touch on that this time. But sometimes the banks are useful for certain things. When we're talking about investment and trying to have money for our retirement, the savings accounts and the banks are not the strong place to have that money.
Yeah, totally. So options for ways to save that makes your money work for you, right? You've got variable accounts, which is a typical example is the stock market, right? So when you buy stocks, you're putting your money into a variable account. In other words, that it's going to vary. It's going to go up and sometimes it's going to go down, right? And you're going to hope that it over time goes up more than down. Then you also have types of accounts which are indexed, meaning they're tied to an index. We've talked about what an index is before. If you have any questions, comment below and we can define it again. But, tying your money to an index using one of these indexed accounts, the advantage there is that when the index goes up, your money goes up, right? You see that growth and you get it in your account. When that index goes down, your money does not go down. They are guaranteeing a 0%
or some type of floor, right?
There's some floor on your gains, which is great. So if you want to get your money and diversify it by putting at least some of it into one of these index accounts, definitely reach out to Ben. Ben, I'm going to put your website up on the screen here so everybody can see it. That's the best way to get a hold of him. Or you can just message him on Facebook, but he doesn't like Facebook, so he's not going to be on here. He's probably not going to see your message. I'm just teasing.
Yeah. He's calling me out. But it's true. I'm not much of a social media person. But yeah, there's definitely strategies like you were just showing that they're a bit more conservative. For somebody that's in the early 20s and trying to make tons of money on their money, this would still be a great way for that long-term retirement, but to get some of like that more large returns on some money, this is a more conservative way to do it. But it's a great way to, exactly like what you're saying, to save money and be able to guarantee that you're not going to lose the money. You're just not getting these crazy rates of return, right? They cap you. You have a cap, but you also have a floor. And that's the brilliance of it, is that floor part of it. Because, it's great making money, but it's really bad losing money, because then the amount of money you have to make the next time around just to break even and make money is so much more, and it can take a long time. So these floors can be extremely helpful in saving that money long term.
So like I said, if you're interested in diversifying a little bit and putting some of your savings into one of these indexed accounts, reach out to Ben and he can sell one to you. Okay, guys? All right. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming on today.
Absolutely.
We will see you next Wednesday.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Bye, everybody.
Guys.